Please take your seats and silence all cell phones. Our program will begin momentarily. Please take your seats and silence all cell phones. Our program will begin momentarily. Please welcome to the stage ALEC National Chairman, Florida Representative Daniel Perez.
Welcome everyone. If everyone can please take their seats so we can get the program started. And I'll wait for everyone to take their seats and we can have some silence in the room before we start with the opening prayer. We still have some moving around. And while you guys are getting to your seats, I did want to welcome everyone to Florida, but more importantly to the 50th anniversary of the annual conference of ALEC. So welcome to Florida, and we're looking forward to the next several days with you guys. Before we start with our program, we're going to start with the opening prayer, and Representative Lawrence McClure from Florida is going to lead us with that.
Let us pray. Lord, we love you and we are so grateful to be gathered here today. We ask that as we deliberate the issues of this great state of Florida, the United States of America, and even issues around the world, that you would be a part of them, that you would grant us wisdom and humility to make sound decisions, and that we would be a steward of our resources. Lord, we ask that you bless the hands of all of those in agriculture that helped harvest this food, the hands that prepared it, and that you bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies and our bodies in service to you. In your Son's holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Lawrence. You know, as we begin this conference, we talk about the free state of Florida and welcoming everyone to the free state of Florida. And although that is very true, I think there's a term that we need to coin in addition to the free state of Florida, which is that this is America's rejuvenation state. And as we've kind of seen the policies of Florida move forward and be an example to the rest of the country, it's important that we ask ourselves, how did this happen, why did it happen, and who deserves the credit? And so selfishly, I will admit it is very selfish of me, I want to acknowledge all elected leaders within the state of Florida for being here today. It is because of you that we are the free state of Florida, the state of American rejuvenation. Thank you. If you can please stand. Thank you, guys. As we know, the principles of ALEC, free markets, limited government, federalism, for 50 years, those have been our principles, and for the next 50, we'll continue those principles as a guiding light for the entire country. But at the same time, I'd like to add two more, at least for this week: perseverance and inspiration. And for me personally, when we talk about inspiration within ALEC, there's a gentleman that I have to bring up, a gentleman that kind of saw some sort of talent that brought me into ALEC and allowed me to be before you guys, and I am forever thankful. And the state of Utah is very lucky to have him. If everyone in this country could have a little bit of President Stuart Adams in them, this country would be a better place. And so, President Adams, thank you. Thank you for being a mentor to me and for being here with us today. Over the next several days, I want us to focus on the goal. And each of you should have your own goal, individually, but as a state as well. But for me, the goal of ALEC over the next week is to restore America, to restore the American dream. And the American dream is something different for every single person in this room. But for me, it's very personal, and it's something that I'd love to share with you guys. My parents left Cuba in 1969. In 1959, democracy fell, and the revolution took over and instituted communism. When that democracy, when that capitalism was taken away from my family, 10 years later they had to leave. And the place that they chose was the United States of America. And it was not by mistake. It was because of the morals, the opportunity, and the founding principles of our founding fathers that led us to where we are today as a country. And I met with someone the other day that asked me a very interesting question. It was a very wealthy man. And he said, "Why do you think I am moving from New York to Florida?" And I said, well, it's probably because of the tax breaks, the financial stability that you're going to have in Florida, and the policies that we've passed. And he said, it's because of the freedom that Florida stands for. And it was so important to me that I was able to hear it, and it resounded to me because it's the same reason that my parents left Cuba to come to the United States in 1969. But that freedom that exerts itself here in Florida is something that the entire country should have. And we have it in many other states. But what I want to do, in the continuation of the challenge that I have for you all, is how are we going to do that moving forward? ALEC has had 50 years of pure success. Pure success. And Lisa Nelson has been an important part of that, but what I talk to Lisa about is I say, how are the next 50 going to look like? Who is Danny Perez in 50 years from now? And I want you also, when you go back home, to think about that. How can we continue over the next 50 years to have those same principles of ALEC, but to put them into our communities, into our state government, and into our children? Speaker Renner here in Florida was asked, what was the most successful part of your session if you had to summarize it in a couple sentences? And he said the success was truly about our children. We think that we prepared our next generation of leaders, our children here in the state of Florida, with the policies that we pass in the House. And I want to see that in every single state across the entire country. And so as we start our conference today and we hear from amazing, amazing leaders, one of them our very own Governor Ron DeSantis, who we've coined here as America's governor, I want you guys to think about how do we continue the pursuit of happiness in every state across the United States? And I want you to ponder that and speak amongst yourself and your table. And as we do that, I want to start with our national anthem, our Pledge of Allegiance, and then a few words from others here in the room. So I would like you guys to help me give a warm welcome to Kevin Harris to sing the national anthem today. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
That was wonderful. Please stay standing. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance that I would love for you guys to join me in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please take a seat. Next, we're going to hear from one of our chairs from ACE. And for those of you who don't know, ACE is the local government arm of ALEC. And with us today, we have the vice chair of the county commission in Miami-Dade County, which is the largest county here in the state of Florida. His name is Anthony Rodriguez. He's a dear friend of mine, and he's a better person. I'm excited to have him with us. Anthony Rodriguez, please come up.
Thank you, Danny. Good afternoon, everyone. I got to be honest with you. I was told that I was going to be speaking here at 11 o'clock last night. So my remarks are going to be a combination of storytelling and looking down at my phone for some key words I put. Listen, as Danny's mentioned, I am the Vice Chairman of Miami-Dade County on the Board of County Commissioners. And I have the pleasure of also being co-chair here at ACE. As Danny mentioned, this is the local branch of ALEC. And we are doing a movement now under Chairman and Speaker-designate Perez's leadership to grow this. So much like so many of you in this room, I was also a state legislator not too long ago. And I remember being a freshman. I remember being a freshman in my first committee and going through the agenda. It's about a 7-page agenda, not to mention the actual full bills. And I remember saying to myself, in fact, I may have said it out loud, that we cannot do this alone. We must do this together with our state, our colleagues at the state, our federal and local partners. And this is exactly why we must work together. We cannot just do one movement as a state. We have to work together with our local partners and continue this. And this is what ACE does. ACE brings together like-minded individuals and empowers them for the same values that ALEC has: freedom, conservatism, and just good for all. So with that, I ask you all to please join me in asking everybody to become a member of ACE. Go back to your local offices and ask everybody to join. We have to grow this, and we have to make sure that we succeed. It is my pleasure to join Speaker Perez here and serve under his leadership and under the leadership of Governor Ron DeSantis in the great state of Florida. So thank you guys, and thank you for being here today. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to conclude our pre-lunch speeches. So we're going to have some food roll out, and we're going to await the arrival of Governor Ron DeSantis. But thank you once again for being here. Enjoy each other, enjoy the camaraderie, and I look forward to meeting each and every one of you. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage ALEC Chief Executive Officer Lisa B. Nelson.
Okay, thank you. Wow, this is amazing. Before I start on anything, I want to call out 2 birthdays that we have at ALEC today. They're both amazing staffers at ALEC. Marie Vulai, who's been at ALEC for 10 years, it's her birthday. And I think they're here somewhere in the room. And Joe Trotter, who is also celebrating his birthday. And I think, Mike, there was some pictures that we had pulled of Marie and Joe for the screen. So I don't know if you're able to pull those up or not. But happy birthday. There's Joe. He's our Energy, Environment, and Agriculture Task Force Director. And he's quite a character. And there's Marie with her 2 angel babies for future ALEC legislators and staffers. Happy birthday to both of you. Well, thank you very much for, yes. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I see a huge crowded room here, and we're very, very excited about this whole week's programs, but especially today. For those of you who are out there on social media, that's fantastic, but anyone who's not, you need to talk to your staff and get on social media. If you are posting throughout this meeting, please be sure to tag us at ALEC_states and use the hashtag ALECideas. So any social media, please do that. You know, people ask about the impact that ALEC makes, where our wins are, our success, and I'm here to tell you our success can be found every day in the men and women who make up our task forces and policy centers. Our success can be found in the 6 states, Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Oklahoma, and Utah, that joined Arizona and West Virginia to offer universal education freedom programs this year. Amazing. And we know that already we've got teed up maybe Texas later in a special session, maybe Wyoming, maybe Georgia will follow suit, but we know that there is more in this education freedom movement that's sweeping the country. So watch that space. Also, our success in the 7 states, Kentucky, West Virginia, Montana, Utah again, Arkansas, North Dakota, and Nebraska that passed tax cuts, and the 7 states, Arkansas, Montana, Utah, Florida, Kentucky, West Virginia, New Hampshire, that followed the ALEC model on fiduciary rules to protect pension plans from politicized investment strategies. Congratulations. It's our model policy on healthcare price transparency that passed in 3 states, Colorado, Texas, and Virginia, and 2 states, Georgia and Virginia, that passed universal occupational licensing bills this year, and 2 others expect to address it in 2024. This is nothing short of miraculous, and it's not just in the red states. It's all over the country that we're pushing these educational reforms, fiscal reforms, transparency reforms around the country. It's in a recent Supreme Court decision to put an end to home equity theft in our inmate reentry model policy that is now law in 4 states, Arkansas, Arizona, Georgia, and Minnesota, and in the 9 states that adopted model policy prohibiting state contracts with Chinese government-owned officials, and the additional 9 states who promised to consider it in 2024. So watch that space and look for our workshop on those topics. This can be seen in our Energy, Environment, and Agricultural Task Force Director, who was asked by Congress to testify in support of deregulating the meat processing industry. All these things tied together. Our next speaker is someone who knows about this success. Last year, he electrified this crowd in Salt Lake City, as I'm sure he'll do again today. No pressure, Will, but he has played an integral role in taking the politics out of your pensions. Just a few short months ago, CEOs and hedge fund managers were quick to tout their devotion to the principles of ESG, or environmental, social, and governance. Now, thanks to his efforts and a number of other people in this room, I'm looking down at you right now, thanks to those efforts, even former ESG-friendly funds like Vanguard have backed away from their attempt to virtue gesture with our retirement counts. With guidance, yes, it's huge. You can literally feel the shift in the pendulum swinging as we communicate and educate. With guidance from ALEC's model policy that calls for pension managers to only consider fiduciary results when investing in funds, treasurers across the country are finally safe to fulfill their duties with fiscal zeal and restraint. We could not be prouder to see legislative chambers across the country embrace these policies that would not have been possible without the dedicated work with friends like Will Hild from Consumers Research, an adversary of ESG everywhere. Please help me welcome Will Hild.
Who helped cause soaring gas prices? BlackRock. Who contributed to outrageous housing prices? BlackRock. BlackRock and Larry Fink spent years harassing oil and gas companies, making them divest from fossil fuels. Now you feel the pain. And BlackRock-owned companies are snatching up houses, crippling families. Now BlackRock's former ESG czar, Brian Deese, is Biden's economic advisor, crushing America from within. That's what BlackRock is really about.
Well, thank you, Lisa. That was such a kind and gracious introduction. I'm excited to be up here today as part of our fight against ESG and against the efforts to defraud consumers and investors everywhere. A couple of years ago, we started something called the Consumers Research Consumer Champion Award. Consumers Research, as some of you may know, is the nation's oldest consumer protection organization. We have a 90-plus year pedigree in standing up for the consumer in the marketplace and amplifying their voice. And we wanted to find a way to highlight state elected officials, whether they be governors or AGs, or in this case, a state legislator, who have gone above and beyond in their defense of consumers. And so I'm excited today to award the Consumers Champion Award, which I will grab here in a second. It's a little large, so I'll finish my remarks first, to Senator Brian Hughes of Texas today. If he could start coming up here. Brian has been an absolute dynamo when it comes to consumer protection, most notably, obviously, on the issues that we are focused on right now in ESG. As chairman of the Texas State Affairs Committee, he launched the first use of the Texas subpoena power under that state constitution through the legislator in over 20 years to take a look at what ISS, proxy advisors, were doing, what BlackRock and State Street were doing with their state pension funds. And they actually held an incredible day-long hearing. How many legislators really want to go through that much work to do an 8-hour deep dive into this stuff? In Marshall, Texas, in the courtroom where he represents those folks. But it's not just that. Obviously, I care a lot about ESG and BlackRock, but it's not just that. He was the one that led the fight on that medical pricing transparency bill that Lisa mentioned. He's worked tirelessly to put an end to spamming and spoof calls in the state of Texas, which I'm a little miffed. My old joke about government was whenever they were going to fix that or whatever problem, I would always say, well, they can't even keep you safe from spam calls. How are they going to fix that? Now I'm going to have to find a new joke. He has fought to keep your credit card safe when you use a credit card at the gas station. They got those spoofers that'll steal your credit card information. He has worked tirelessly, and this isn't a consumer issue, but just to give you a span of his work, I mean, he's even led the anti-abortion bill in Texas as well. So he is just a man on fire for consumer issues, for conservative issues, and so we are proud. One second. To award Senator Hughes the Consumers Champion Award. And it's I happen to be from the South, but not from Texas. And Texas is kind of infamous for being, everything's bigger in Texas, everything's a little bit more pugilistic. So we thought you could use some armor for all those fights you're taking on when there's coming after you. So thank you, Senator. Thank you. Where's the photo?
Thank you, brother. No one here is old enough to remember U.S. Senator Phil Gramm from Texas, but you've read about him. And he said, I know some of you remember him, he said when he got to Congress, he talked about going to the U.S. House before the Senate. When he got to the U.S. House, when he was first elected, he talked about how overwhelming it was. You go to Washington and just the beauty of the buildings and the history and the gravity of the matters that are dealt with there and the historic names of folks who served there before you. And it's just overwhelming. And he said, when you first get to Congress, you think, man, how did I get here? And then after a couple of weeks, you meet some of your colleagues and you ask, how did they get here? I'm sure people ask that about me. There's a group of folks here that no one asks that about, and I want to make sure and recognize my friends from the Texas legislature, from the House and the Senate, taking up a big section in the middle. They're not in the middle politically, but in the room, they're right there leading the fight on all the things we've been talking about. So thankful. I'm so thankful to be among all of you. I know how each of you got here. I know something about the work that you're doing. And ESG was a mystery to us for a while. Many of you were probably ahead of me, but for the last 4 or 5 years, when we saw companies, major corporations, take these hard left positions against energy independence, right? Against cheap, reliable energy, against common sense voting laws that we were trying to pass, did pass in Texas, Florida, Georgia, Pennsylvania. So many states was doing this. And we were fighting these corporations. And I thought, why are they alienating half of their consumer base? Well, this doesn't make any sense. And we thought, well, maybe they're worried about newer consumers coming up and they're just getting pressure. But now we know there was a lot more at work. We know ESG was happening, don't we? And so what does BlackRock do? BlackRock, State Street, trillions of dollars in assets. But of course, it's not their money. It's your money. It's your state pension funds. It's your university endowment funds. It's your 401ks. It's a lot of retired teachers and mom and pops who trust these folks to invest their money. So they take your money and they buy shares with your money. And under federal law, they own the shares. And since they own the shares, they own the voting rights to the shares. So what happens? It's time for the annual meeting for Exxon, for IBM, for fill in the blank. And the boys from BlackRock come in and say, hey, we've got millions of shares in your company. We'd like you to adopt these policies. We'd like you to make these changes. And if you don't, we'll have to replace your board and replace you as CEO. It's kind of like in the 20s in Chicago when Al Capone's guy comes to your store and says, hey, you got a nice store here. I'd hate for it to burn down. I can help you with that if you'll just pay me for protection. That is what they are doing with your money, with our money. But Texas is pushing back. Red states are pushing back. I talk to so many people in the corporate world that tell me, I'm so glad that conservative states are finally pushing back, because all we hear from is the left. And we've got to hold our board back from just going so far because of all the pressure. So let me say to our friends here in the corporate world, we are so thankful for you. We believe in free markets and freedom. We're thankful for your involvement in ALEC and for all that you do. And to those of you who've been getting pressure from the left to do all these things that are against your bottom line, well, hope is on the way, because the red states, ALEC, Consumers Research, people in this room are pushing back. You're getting pressure back from the right, finally. And to our friends who would like to substitute a woke agenda for the bottom line, please don't do that. Please don't do that. If you do, you will face the wrath of the people of America acting through their state legislators in this room and across the country who are for freedom and for free markets. Because as Will was saying, the oldest consumers group in the country is the one that's for free markets, because free markets do the most good for the most people. It lifts up the poor. It lifts up workers. We are the party of the people, not the other guys. I don't want to be partisan. We conservatives are for working people, for real people. And I know you know that. That's why you're here. And I'm so blessed to be here among you. Please keep doing what you're doing. We recognize in America, of course, our founders reminded us that our rights, free speech, don't worry, I'm not going to exercise much more free speech, but free speech, freedom of expression, freedom to petition the government for redress, those uniquely American rights, They came to us from our Creator, that same Creator who loves us each individually so much, loves us so much that he gave his only Son to pay the price for our sins and to raise up from the grave after that. That's how much he loves us, and he has entrusted this system to us. Our countrymen are looking to us. Who's speaking for those people who are working hard, trying to keep up with inflation, trying to provide for their families? Well, we are. If you're in this room, if you're a policy person, you're in a think tank, you're taking these conservative principles and putting feet to them. If you're in advocacy, helping us get the word out, maybe you're raising money, maybe you're in the business side helping, maybe you're elected, maybe you're on the staff side. Whatever you're doing in this movement, it matters. Please keep doing what you're doing. It is my distinct honor to be in this fight with you. I'm so thankful for Consumers Research, for Will, for Mike, for people that roadmap this for us, and I'm glad to be here at ALEC. ALEC, thank you for standing even against pressure in this fight against ESG, this fight for people. That's who we represent. By God's grace, we'll keep doing that. Thank you so much. I'm honored by this award. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage Daniel Perez. Please welcome back to the stage.
That's a long walk. Lord. Well, thank you guys for that warm welcome. The next person up to speak truly needs no introduction, as the rest of the country and the DC powers were pushing back on the closure of our schools, our businesses, our churches. There was one specific person that fought back with all of his might and led the state of Florida into its own level. And I'm very proud to call him a friend. He's a good family man. He's a good man of ALEC. He's been here before, and he received the Art Laffer Award, which is one of the most prestigious awards that ALEC can give to anyone, and it's based on his principles, his morals, and his leadership of the state of Florida. Without further ado, my friend and the governor of the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the free state of Florida. It's great to be with you. I appreciate everyone coming here. Thanks to ALEC for hosting it here. I'm known for certain things, free state of Florida, school choice, fighting woke, all these other things. But maybe the thing I'm known for most in this group is I am an Art Laffer Award winner. And I saw the award back there, and I saw Art coming in. I don't know that they've announced who's getting it coming forward, but I know that carries a lot of weight. So let me just say, whoever does get it, congratulations, and you have now joined rarefied air and people that have won the Art Laffer Award. So thanks to ALEC for doing that. I want to thank Danny Perez for all his work, as well as Speaker Paul Renner from Florida, and all the members of the Florida legislature who are here, and even those who are not here. We were able to work together to complete, which was the most productive and far-reaching legislative session in the history of the state of Florida. And you can go down the list of so many different things, from cutting taxes to school choice, to parents' rights, to anti-ESG, all these different things. Anything that was on the menu, we got it done. And I campaigned for re-election alongside a lot of these guys. Every single thing we told the voters that we would do, we did, and then some. How often do people promise and over-deliver? They usually under-deliver, and so I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful for all the other state legislators here today. The fact of the matter is, it is in Republican-controlled state houses across the country that big wins are being done on behalf of freedom. And we can see that by where people are coming from and where they're moving to, And so there's so many different states, and I ran into some of the folks from Iowa and Utah, ran into Stewart from Utah, ran into folks. You guys are doing great work, and we compete with you. If you guys do something we haven't done, Renner and these guys, they start working to make sure we're doing it. And I know a lot of you have been able to watch Florida and work with us too. And that's very, very healthy, and that's very, very productive. All the good policy in this country are being done by state legislators that have a conservative majority. So thank you for supporting freedom in this country and preserving it against a lot of hostile forces. And it's important to acknowledge that, because the fact of the matter is, this country is in a state of decline. Economic decline, military decline, cultural decline. And if we look at states that are governed by leftist politicians wielding leftist ideology, those states are symptomatic of the larger decline in our country. And I can cite you statistics, but all you have to do is look how people are voting with their feet. Those states that impose those anti-freedom policies are hemorrhaging businesses, hemorrhaging residents, and they're hemorrhaging wealth. We see crime going through the roof in many of the urban centers in these areas, and their education systems have declined dramatically as those policies have taken hold more and more. So this should tell us, compared to a lot of the success we've had in our states, where the debate is about the future of our country. The decline of our country, though, is not inevitable. The decline is a choice. It's a choice we as Americans will be making in the ensuing months and years. I believe that Florida shows the way to reverse our nation's decline, restore sanity to our society, and usher into this country a new birth of freedom. We have, in Florida, shown the way on how to have a strong, robust economy. Our economy is now ranked #1 in the nation by U.S. News and World Report overall. And I know some of you states have some competition there, and there's some other states doing good. We have a large budget surplus, a AAA credit rating. We actually embarked on an accelerated debt repayment program just this year, so we just retired an extra $400 million of state debt early, saving the taxpayers almost $25 million in interest costs. Since I've been governor in 2019, we've retired almost 25% of our total state debt. Don't you wish Washington was doing something like that? Florida ranks #1 in new business formations. Our unemployment rate is the lowest amongst all large states and way, way below the national average. We've ranked #1 for economic growth amongst the big states since I've been governor. And we just concluded a legislative session where we provided a record amount of tax relief in the billions of dollars. I think the record prior to me becoming governor was a few $100 million in a year. We just racked up $2.7 billion in tax relief in one legislative session. And of course, like some of the states that are here, Florida does not have an income tax. For those of you who do, you should try it our way sometime. I think you'll like it. We also have one of the lowest per capita tax burdens in the entire country. So we're proud of all of that, but at the end of the day, we would not have been able to lead on the economy. I think we've had more wealth move into Florida in the last 3 years than has ever moved into a single state over a similar period of time in all of American history, if you can believe that. But none of that would have happened had we been not willing to buck the orthodoxy when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic measures and lockdown measures. And those were things that were being preached upon from on high by people like Dr. Fauci, and they said it was going to be 15 days, but in reality, they wanted to go on in perpetuity, a relative perpetuity, and they probably would have gotten away with it if states like Florida had not said, no, we're gonna go a different way. So we said very simply, people have a right to work, businesses have a right to operate, and kids have a right to be in school in person 5 days a week, and that's just the way it's gonna be. Fauci doesn't care about your freedom. He doesn't care about your job or your business or the education. And so you needed people in elected office to stand up for people when nobody else was willing to do it. And at the end of the day, the reason why we were able to do well is because when it wasn't easy to stand against the grain, when we were taking a lot of incoming, people think like I'm taking incoming now. I was taking way more incoming in 2020, let me tell you, with COVID. And it's easy just to go with the crowd. It's easy to say, well, the bureaucrats are telling me we can't do any of that, and so it's not up to me. You can do that, or you can lead, and you can put the freedoms and the jobs of the people you represent over any short-term political considerations. And so that's what we did. We fought for the people of this state when nobody else was willing to do it. And what shows in the election, so Florida had been a competitive state for a long time. I won by a narrow margin. My predecessor had won by a narrow margin. The presidentials had typically been 1-point races. And we were able to win in 2022 in a year that was not a red wave nationally. We were able to win by almost 20 points, 1.5 million vote margin, which was historic for a Republican in the state of Florida. What it shows you is if people see that you're willing to fight for them, if they see that you're willing to take arrows for them, they will come out and support you. They will be willing to crawl over hot coals barefoot to be able to support you. They just want to know that you're willing to fight for them. And that's what we did in Florida. We need that nationally, because if you look at what's going on in our economy nationally, we have a lot of problems, many of which are government-induced problems. We're in an era of persistently high prices and inflation. When they say inflation is slowed, the prices are not coming down, they're just going up at a lower rate. Why is this happening? Because government, starting in March of 2020, with the COVID and the Fauci lockdowns, borrowed, printed, and spent trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. And I think it's been said that there's nothing more expensive than free money. And what we've seen in the last few years shows that that's the case. The fact of the matter is, if you could just borrow and print and spend without any limit, why not just do 30 trillion or 50 trillion, right? We'd all live happily ever after. But we all know that is not the way this works, and that the bill comes due. So now you're in a situation where you've had persistently high inflation. We have very tepid economic growth, may even end up being negative very, very soon. Interest rates are high, which makes it difficult for people to be able to afford to purchase a home. If you purchased a home 4 years ago compared to now, between the increase in home prices and the interest rates, you're paying at least double in monthly mortgage payments than what you would have done even 4 or 5 years ago. We see cars are more expensive. And so for people that are just working, doing the right thing, this has got to be one of the worst economies they've had in their lifetime. And it's your government that helped bring that into effect. And the Federal Reserve has been a huge part of the problem on this. One, just having perpetual quantitative easing, which is something that benefits people with a lot of assets. And you see asset inflation. It has not produced results for people who are working and middle class. Their job at the Fed should simply be to maintain stable prices, not to be an economic central planner, not to worry about social issues or climate change or any of that stuff. And so they've dropped the ball first by printing too much, but then also trying to act like the inflation was transitory when it was obvious that this was something that was going to be an issue. I mean, Milton Friedman said, when you start going on spending and borrowing binges, you're going to get inflation, 18 to 20 months later, and that's exactly what happened, and the Fed acted like that no longer applied. So they've been a big problem with this. Another big problem has been our monstrous bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. that stifles innovation, that is actually probably helpful for a lot of the biggest companies because they get a competitive advantage over smaller competitors. But for small and medium-sized businesses, they get whacked every single day. And it's bad enough the policies that they're doing. These policies are not policies oftentimes even enacted by the elected representatives of the people. They're done through nameless, faceless bureaucrats issuing rules about what kind of energy you can use, what kind of car you can drive, whether you can even use a gas stove in the future. Florida, in our legislative session, we made gas stoves tax-free, so you can see where we stand on that. But they're exercising massive amounts of power through a fourth branch of government, which is not constitutionally accountable to the electorate. Our founding fathers did not design a system like that. They knew that it would abuse its power. So we really have a mission in front of us to reconstitutionalize this government and to no longer have a fourth branch of government, but to return to 3 branches of government, which is what the founding fathers envisioned. And why is that important? Yes, thank you. And why is that important? Because part of the reason we have tepid growth and have had tepid growth for a long time in this country is because government is choking off a lot of the creative energy in our economy in a lot of these sectors. We need to get back to 3% growth in this country or more. And if we can't do that, we're not going to ever fix our budget problems. We're not going to be able to compete with China and the CCP. So everything we do needs to be geared towards opening up the ability to grow more. You're never going to be able to hit those growth targets with the regulatory monstrosity that we have in Washington, D.C. So you want to talk about draining the swamp? That's where you start with that bureaucracy. We also have an administration that is just so out to lunch on, okay, we have competitors in this world like China, you have countries like Russia. The last thing you would want to do, knowing the picture that's going on, is to kneecap your own domestic energy production. And yet that's exactly what we're trying to do. So we need to open up our ability to produce our own energy, use the resources that we have. It's good for families because they'll have cheaper energy. It's good for businesses because that impacts everything they do in terms of their costs. It's good for our industrial base. Let's permit more pipelines. Let's do all this stuff. That'd be really good. And it is good for our national security. You want to control your own destiny when it comes to energy. And China is oil poor. It's a competitive advantage for us. When you're trying to force people into electric vehicles, first of all, that's not the proper role of government to do that. If you want that, you can buy it. A lot of people don't. So don't do that stuff. But when you're doing that, you're giving China a competitive advantage, because where does most of the stuff come from that goes into creating these parts? It mostly comes from China. So you're giving them an advantage on a silver platter, and it makes absolutely no sense. So that is something very easy that we can be doing that'll have a huge impact on the daily lives of Americans and a positive impact on our economy. We also need to understand that what the Biden administration's doing and other states are doing to try to politicize our economy is a dead end. Things like ESG, environment, social governance, all that is a pretext for them to be able to use the economy to advance their political agenda. And that could be anything, at any different time. It is a violation for a public company's fiduciary duties to depart from doing what's the best business decision to indulging in some of this social activism. It's not good for shareholders, and it's not good ultimately for the economy. You can't have companies taking positions on all these different issues. If that's the expectation, we are not going to perform optimally the way we would want to. So ultimately, ESG is about more control over the economy. These are corporations that are effectively doing the bidding of a lot of ruling elites in government. and they're doing through the economy what they could never achieve at the ballot box, and that's a problem for constitutional accountability. So in Florida, we have kneecapped ESG in this state. It is not allowed in our pension system. We don't have social credit scores. You know, they want your credit worthiness is going to in part depend on whether you bend the knee for the latest political fad. That is totally unacceptable. We also protected Floridians against things like ideological debanking, which you have seen, particularly from some of the big Wall Street banks. So it's not good for our society, it's not good for our economy, and it's ultimately not good for human freedom. And that goes for other measures that the federal government is thinking about doing to exert more control over our economic activity. And one of the things we have done in Florida is we recognize the danger posed to the proposed central bank digital currency that they're talking about doing in DC. CBDC is not in our best interests. It is not good for your privacy. It is not good for your economic freedom. They say, well, we're just thinking about doing it. Maybe we do it without Congress acting, which they don't have authority to do. In Florida, we said, we're not doing CBDC here, so we signed legislation protecting people from that. I don't know if they're going to try to do it unilaterally under Biden. I don't think Congress would likely enact it, but why is this not a good thing? What they want to do, they want to go to a cashless society, they want to eliminate cryptocurrency, and they want this to be the sole way that you can buy things. They're going to use that power to impose something like a social credit system. You know that's what they do. You have these people at the World Economic Forum, like, you know, sitting there like grinning, like, oh, if they want to buy fuel or ammunition, we'll be able to put the that's their vision. They want to be able to circumscribe your behavior to make it conform with their ideological objectives. And so CBDC needs to be DOA in the United States of America. We also need to recognize that threats to this country from like China are not limited to military threats. The competition with China, our adversarial relationship with China is a tough problem because of the economic dependence that has developed in this country. When COVID hit, almost everything we needed was made in China. We could not get everything we need to function as a country right now without relying on China. That is not a healthy place to be. And if you look at the China policy over the past many decades, you know, China has gotten very, very rich. China has become a manufacturing superpower. They've built up their military to where they're the second strongest military in the world, bar none, competing with the United States. Their GDP is actually forecasted to pass ours within the next 5 or 10 years. We've never had a peer competitor in any of our lifetimes that had a bigger and stronger economy than we did. When you look at the Soviet Union, that was primarily an ideological confrontation. Yes, military in the sense of the nuclear standoff, but their economy was a pittance compared to the American economy. We now have a competitor that could potentially surpass us. And so we can't let that happen. I mean, we have to win, but the way we win and they lose is to recognize we've got to do more of this in the United States. You can't subcontract out key parts of your economy to your top threat and your top adversaries. And we've recognized that in Florida. We signed legislation prohibiting the purchase of land by the CCP and its related entities in our state. They want to buy farmland, they want to buy land near military bases and other strategic locations. That is not going to work in the state of Florida. We're going to continue to keep this a freedom zone. But ultimately, when you're looking with the economy, the question is less about dollars and cents. I mean, that does matter, but it's really about what kind of society do we want to have. During COVID, when we had this, what I was seeing happening was a massive transfer of wealth from working class people and small businesses to some of the biggest entrenched corporations in the world, like Apple and Google and Facebook. And that was as a result of these lockdowns. That was not the type of society I thought was best for our country. And so in Florida, we were protecting people who were working in hospitality, who were working in construction, who were working in jobs where you actually had to show up and you couldn't do it in your pajamas on Zoom. So that was important, and then that's created more growth here, and it's created more opportunities for average people. So we're proud of what we've done in Florida. We need to get the federal government in line because it is failing this country when it comes to the economy. We've also led on the issue of education, and I know a lot of you in your states are working hard on this. We all probably are more attuned today than maybe many conservatives were 10 years ago on just how important it is to get the education issue right. Not that people weren't concerned about it, because they were, but we've seen such an attempt to use the schools as tools of indoctrination and all kinds of other things that we know we're not going to be successful as a country if we go down that road. So in Florida, we're proud to have been ranked #1 in the nation in education by U.S. News and World Report. When we had the first post-COVID NAEP scores, Nations Report Card, Florida ranked #3 and 4 respectively in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. I can tell you that wasn't true as a kid when I was growing up in Florida, so we've done a lot better than we did a generation ago. And it helped that we actually had kids in school during COVID, unlike some of these other states which kept them out for a year or more. Part of the reason we've been able to increase test scores is because we have the most school choice of any state in the country. And we've expanded it in this legislative session where we now have universal ESAs. But what's happened is parents now have options. They can go to a private school. We have 363,000 students in charter schools, which are public but not controlled by the school district and hence usually not influenced by the education unions. And then you have the 67 counties that all have their separate school district. And what's happened with the school districts is they want these students too. So they've actually embraced choice within their own district. So if you're in South Florida, like Miami-Dade, you can go to charter, to private, and probably a handful of public schools within your school district. 75% of the kids aren't even going to the school that they're zoned for anymore because you have so much choice. Because you have that, it's created healthy competition, and our test scores, where they used to be in the bottom 10, 15 states 25, 30 years ago, we now are in the top. And if you say 3 and 4 for the 4th grade reading, 4th grade math, if you control for demographics, we'd be #1 with that. If you looked at just our charter school population, which is disproportionately low income and minority, if that was a separate state, just our charter students, that would be one of the top performing states in the United States as well. So this works. We've proven that it works, and it's something that I know other states are emulating, and we would certainly encourage you to do that. We've also stood very strong for the rights of parents to direct the education and upbringing of their kids. It's sad that we're even having this debate, and this is personal for me and my wife because we've got a 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old at home, but we want parents involved in their kids' education. The only reason you wouldn't want the parents involved is because you worry that the parent would represent an impediment to you imposing your agenda on somebody else's kids. When Biden says they're not your kids, they're all of our kids, that's what he means. Now, he's not talking about visiting his granddaughter in Arkansas or even acknowledging she exists, but never mind that, right? So they're not all of our kids. They're your kids. And schools and our school system doesn't exist to supersede the rights of parents. They exist to support the community, to support this important mission. And so we've embraced that in the state of Florida. We've listened to parents on things like eliminating Common Core, which we did early in my administration. We've also recognized the importance of recruiting and retaining good teachers. So we've put billions of dollars in increase for teacher salaries since I've been governor, but we said it can only go to teachers, not to bureaucrats and not to unions. And we actually did paycheck protection for teachers in Florida so the education unions can't do automatic union dues deduction from their paycheck. We've also drawn a very clear line in the sand. The purpose of our school system is education, not indoctrination. We want to have schools teach the basics. And so that's why we fought to do things like not have gender ideology in kindergarten, where they're telling students that they were born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. And we stood up to the left and the media and even big companies down the road here to make sure that we are standing on the side of parents and standing on the side of the innocence of our children. And that is a line we in the state of Florida are not willing to cross. We are going to stand up for our children. You also see, and you've seen the left try to demagogue that, you get to this point. So we have curriculum transparency. You can come in, parents know what's being taught in the school. And unfortunately, there are things that are totally inappropriate that are being put, particularly in these early grades, things that are pornographic, for example. Now, if you walked into a 4th grade classroom and someone was playing an X-rated movie, you would take that movie out and that would not be appropriate. No one would say that you've banned that movie from society. So when they try to do book ban, that's a hoax. Nothing's being banned in Florida. You can do whatever you want as an adult, but to inject that into a 4th grade classroom, is wrong. Adult material shouldn't be in a 4th grade classroom. You want to look at adult material? Go watch Hunter Biden's laptop for all I care, but don't do it to our kids. So that's a hoax, and we fought back against that. They also now have we, a couple years ago, did a law to prohibit critical race theory from our K through 12 schools, because we don't want them to use history and distort it to support a modern day agenda. You teach the facts. And so as part of that, they actually accused at the time, because you don't want CRT, you don't want anyone to learn about African American history, which that was a lie. And so we had the Department of Education, or the State Board of Education, had a working group of African American history scholars that really beefed up Florida standards. I mean, probably the most dramatic anywhere in the country. And you now have people like Kamala Harris trying to perpetuate a hoax, saying that these African American history scholars, many of whom were black, some of them who descended from slaves, are creating a curriculum saying it was good? Are you kidding me? Who believes such nonsense? And so it's a total hoax, and it shows you, though, why are they doing that? Why would they come down when you have all these other problems, come down to Florida and lie about something that's readily checkable if you just look at how robust the standards are? And it's because they know in Florida we are contesting their right to use the schools to advance their agenda. We are teaching the honest history, good, bad, and ugly, teaching all the injustices with respect to slavery and a whole bunch of other things that happen. But that's not good enough for them. They want to wrap that in and be able to use that to advance their modern agenda. And these scholars were not interested in that. All they wanted to do was provide the facts. And so I'm glad that their lies have been exposed by people like Kamala Harris. And we're going to continue to stand up against phony media narratives when it comes to education. Final topic on education. We are also reforming higher education in the state of Florida. At the end of the day, our public university systems exist to serve the people of our respective states. They are supported by taxpayers. They don't have the right to just do whatever they want, regardless of whether it's benefiting the people who are funding them. You need universities to fulfill the traditional mission of a university, the pursuit of truth, academic rigor, preparing our students to be citizens of our republic. They are not meant to indoctrinate students in political ideology. That is not a good use of taxpayer funds. So we've laid down the marker on that. We've also now have in Florida, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go for poor performance. And we just signed legislation that the legislature passed that we've nixed this whole idea of DEI in our public universities. I don't know that it's constitutional after the Supreme Court's decision with respect to racial discrimination in admissions, but it is discriminatory. It's ideological. And DEI, we say, it stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public universities. So we've stood up for that. And guess what's happened as we've done it? We've seen a flood of applications coming. the media will say, oh, some of these professors are leaving like New College. Like, isn't that is that a brain drain? Well, if you're a professor in like, Marxist studies, that's not a loss for Florida if you're going on. Trust me, I'm totally good with that. But at the end of the day, I'll just leave you with this thought. When we're fighting the good fight, when we're fighting for freedom, you're fighting against the tide of the federal government, the corporate media, the institutional left, even sometimes people who claim to be on our side aren't willing to stand up for what's right when it really counts. And so at this stage, in the battles in front of us, really calls for leadership, and it calls for courage under fire. Because when you're standing up to do the right things, some of the things you all have done in your legislatures, what we've done in Florida, you are going to face blowback. They're going to sling arrows at you. They're going to call you names. They're going to lie about you. They're going to smear you. And the question is, are you going to stand your ground, or are you going to fold under those circumstances? In Florida, we stand our ground. We stand for truth. We stand for what is right, and we do not back down under fire. I appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you all. God bless you. God bless your states, and God bless these United States of America. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you. Godspeed.
Please welcome back to the stage, Lisa Nelson.
Wow, how is that for an opening session? Pretty amazing. We have birthday celebrations, consumers research, Will Hild, Senator Brian Hughes, and Governor of the Free State of Florida, Ron DeSantis. Thank you all so much for spending your incredible time with us. A big thanks to our sponsors for this session, sponsoring an incredible week of legislative and policy debate. For 50 years, ALEC has provided a platform for legislators like you to come together, share the bills and the model policy that you've created, the battles that you've waged, and the potential pitfalls that you've seen along the way. Some might use not to be working together, person to person, state to state, because when we do, it is sure to be a recipe for success. We cannot falter. We must stay strong. We must stay vigilant in the same way that Governor DeSantis has. We must push forward and change the national conversation away from one that embraces the woke agenda to one that embraces the Jeffersonian principles of free markets, limited governments, and federalism. For a little bit of housekeeping, I would like to remind everyone, if you have not signed up for the Universal Tour Package, there is still time. Not Disney, it's Universal. If you have any questions about what Universal has to offer, just ask any one of those Florida legislators that are up front and stood up at this opening lunch. Don't forget to check the scrolls, which will be streaming throughout the event. Find yourself and your friends making the most of this annual meeting this afternoon. At 1:45, we have a few workshops, Stopping ESG, AKA Conscientious Capitalism, in Mediterranean Ballroom 1 and 2. Making broadband investments count while protecting your taxpayers' funds. That's in Mediterranean Ballroom 6 and 7. And then later today, we have the perils and the promise of teen online safety legislation in Mediterranean 1 and 2, and winning on safety and crime in Mediterranean Ballroom 3. The bright lights of liberty, the big state wins that make us more free and drive the left crazy in Mediterranean Ballroom 6 and 7. That sounds kind of fun. And as Danny said earlier, please take advantage of all the Universal tours. Thank you so much, and we'll see you later. Have a great afternoon.